Dear friends, as we come to the end of the second week of our COVID lockdown and brace ourselves for a third week next week, I hope and pray that you are coping okay amidst all of the frustrations. I've heard people talk about pandemic fatigue, and I think I can understand what they're talking about, that sense of tiredness over the whole lockdown situation, that frustration of not being able to go to where we would like to go, to see people we'd like to see, those restrictions that we find ourselves under. I guess perhaps in perspective, they are fairly insignificant restrictions in some regard. We are at least able to go to the shops and exercise and things like that. And we do look forward to the prospect that they may be lifted, hopefully at the end of next week, although we wait and see. I heard a great sermon on Psalm 138 last week. Psalm 138 is written by David in the midst of great suffering and despair, and yet he opens the psalm with these words, "I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. Before the gods I will sing your praise." And then he goes on to say, when I called, you answered me. You made me bold and stout-hearted. And then towards the end of the psalm, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands. It's a psalm that gives us great encouragement that in the midst of difficulties and hardship or even suffering, the scriptures give us confidence to sing God's praise. It reminds me of Paul and Silas in Corinth in Acts, or in Philippi, I should say, in Acts, when they are in jail. And in the midst of that dungeon setting, chained in prison, they sing praises to God. Why do they sing praises to God? Why is a psalmist happy to sing praises to God in the midst of suffering? I think it's because they are reminded that God's love is unfailing. In Psalm 138, he says in verse 2, "I will praise your name for your love and your faithfulness." Some translations have it enduring love or faithful love. That sense of God's love not abandoning us, not leaving us or nor forsaking us. God's faithful presence. And as the psalm says at the end of the psalm, it talks about God's plans. Do not abandon the works of your hands. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. The Lord will fulfill his plans and purposes. So even though we are in lockdown, even though we are restricted, even though we cannot do the things that we'd like to do, we can know that God will continue to fulfill his plans and purposes in us and for us. One of those plans and purposes, of course, is to make us more like Jesus, is to mould our character, is to help us develop perseverance and faithfulness and patience. And I guess a lockdown circumstance can certainly help us to do that. To be patient, to persevere, and continue to trust God. So as we go through into this next week of lockdown, I hope and pray that you will find some sense of comfort and peace in the presence of God. I hope that you'll find some encouragement in the knowledge that God is with us, that God is still accomplishing his plans and purposes, and that even when we come out of lockdown, we may look back and see that we have grown in some measure, in some way, as we have trusted God. I continue to pray for you all as I work through the church directory and prayer diary, thanking God for you, and I hope and pray that you are well and safe and again experiencing the grace and mercy of God as you are reminded of his faithfulness. May God bless you. Amen.